Amanda Green stood at the edge of her mother's driveway in Eugene, Oregon, the early morning sun casting a golden hue on the damp pavement. Her faded teal van, lovingly nicknamed Junebug, was packed to the ceiling with camping gear, camera equipment, notebooks, and a few keepsakes from home. It was the beginning of what she had called her Freedom Journey, a solo road trip across America, documenting forgotten places and unheard voices for her travel blog, Wanderlust Woman. Her followers had grown steadily over the past 2 years, drawn in by her raw storytelling, soulful photography, and fearless independence. Now, with over 100,000 loyal subscribers, she felt ready to turn her passion into a full-time life on the road. Her mom, Karen, tried to smile as she hugged Amanda one more time, but her eyes betrayed the worry she felt. "Just promise me you'll check in every day," she said softly, brushing Amanda's auburn hair out of her face like she had done since she was a little girl. Amanda chuckled, trying to lighten the moment. "Mom, I'm going to be fine. I'll text every night, promise." But something flickered behind her confident voice, a mix of excitement and anxiety. She'd never been away from home this long, or this far. As she climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key, the van roared to life with a reassuring rumble. A sticker on the rear bumper read, "Not all who wander are lost," a quote Amanda lived by. She waved through the open window, then pulled away slowly, the gravel crunching under the wheels. Her mom stood watching long after the van disappeared down the winding road. Amanda's first few days on the road were everything she'd imagined. She stopped at quirky diners, interviewed small-town artists, photographed murals fading on brick buildings, and camped beneath starlit skies. Her blog posts overflowed with life and color. Her photos showed the open roads of Nevada, a ghost town in Utah, a sunset over New Mexico's high desert. She wrote about the kindness of strangers, the taste of green chili enchiladas in Santa Fe, and the silence of forgotten highways. By the time she reached Texas, she had already filled 2 memory cards with footage and images. She texted her mom, "Stopping at a little roadside motel in Marfa tonight. Views are insane. You'd love it." That was the last message anyone received. The next day, her blog post didn't go live. Her social media fell silent. For her fans, it was odd, but not immediately alarming. Amanda had skipped posts before during spotty reception or long hikes. But when her mother called and it went straight to voicemail, a knot of dread began to form in her stomach. The motel confirmed Amanda had checked in, and checked out the next morning. Her room was left clean, the key returned. The clerk remembered her, bright, polite, and carrying a battered notebook. But after that, she vanished. Her phone pinged one last time, near a rugged patch of land close to the Mexico border, a lonely stretch of highway near Presidio. After that, nothing. The van wasn't spotted again. Local authorities launched a brief investigation, but with no evidence of a crime and no clear direction, it quickly went cold. Flyers were posted. Online groups formed. The hashtag Find Amanda trended briefly. Her followers dug through her posts, her photos, trying to spot a clue. Some believed she ran off for a new life. Others feared something much darker. But her mother never gave up. Every holiday, she left a candle burning by the window. Every year on Amanda's birthday, she posted a new photo and a plea, "If you know anything, please come forward." Time passed, and the world moved on. But for one grieving family, and a few loyal followers, the mystery of Amanda Green became more than a story. It became a haunting absence. And all the while, the Rio Grande flowed quietly under the Texas sun, holding its secret for 6 long years. The days following Amanda's disappearance moved in slow, aching motion. At first, no one panicked. A missed blog post. Maybe she lost signal. A delayed text. Maybe she just needed a break. But as hours turned into a full day, and then another, unease spread like a slow fog. Amanda was always consistent. She never left her mother hanging. She never let her audience wait too long without an update, even when off the grid. Something felt wrong. Karen called Amanda's phone repeatedly, each time hoping for a ring, a click, a voice. But it always went straight to voicemail. She left messages, dozens of them, her voice growing more desperate each time. "Amanda, it's Mom. Please call me back. Just let me know you're okay. I love you." Eventually, even that hope dulled. The phone wasn't dead. It was turned off. 2 days later, Karen contacted the police. The local authorities in Texas, where Amanda was last believed to be, filed a missing persons report. But without any signs of foul play or evidence of danger, their urgency was minimal. Adults have the right to disappear, one deputy told her bluntly. Karen's pleas barely moved the needle. To them, Amanda was a grown woman on an unconventional path. Maybe she'd just decided to go off the radar. It happened, but her online community refused to accept that explanation. Amanda's followers, many of whom had followed her for years, knew her rhythms and habits. They banded together, forming a Facebook group and sharing her last known locations, timestamps on posts, and screenshots of messages. One follower tracked her last GPS-tagged Instagram story to a remote town outside El Paso. Another noticed that her last blog entry, though scheduled for release, never went live. Something had clearly interrupted her plans. Then came the data from Amanda's cell provider. Her last ping came from a tower near the Rio Grande, on a desolate highway between Presidio and Redford. It was a place known for its silence and emptiness, an unforgiving stretch of land baked under the Texas sun. No tourist attractions, no scenic routes, just brush, sand, and the slow winding of the river that marked the border. That lone ping would become the center of the entire investigation. Search parties organized sporadically over the next few weeks. Volunteers scoured the highway, walking miles of desert with dogs, drones, and hope. But they found nothing. No broken down van, no discarded belongings, no tire tracks. It was as though Amanda had dissolved into the landscape. Months passed, and the case faded from headlines. With no new leads and no trace of Amanda, the official investigation slowed to a crawl. The police stopped returning Karen's calls as often. The online search groups lost momentum. Some assumed she had met someone and chosen a new life, out of reach from her former one. Others whispered darker theories: abduction, trafficking, violence. Karen refused to give up. She created a timeline of Amanda's journey, contacted every motel and gas station in the region, and spent her savings hiring private investigators. Most found nothing. One promised leads but ghosted after receiving his deposit. Every hope she grabbed onto seemed to crumble in her hands. Amanda's blog remained frozen in time, her last post still titled, "The Desert Has a Memory." Her photos stopped, her voice went silent. Yet her presence lingered, like a phantom on the internet, drawing curious eyes and grieving hearts. People left comments on her old posts, hoping she'd return. "Still thinking about you," one read. "We haven't forgotten." Back in Oregon, Amanda's bedroom was untouched. Karen kept it just as it was, hoping for the day her daughter might walk back through the door. Her journals, her world map covered in pins and scribbled notes, everything remained. 6 years would pass before the desert yielded its secret. Until then, Amanda Green remained a face on a flyer, a mystery waiting to be solved. Her final known location, a lonely blip on a cell tower's log, was the only marker left of a vibrant life that vanished without explanation. And somewhere beyond that last signal, the Rio Grande flowed on, silent and unforgiving. The summer heat in southern Texas was unrelenting, baking the earth and draining every drop of moisture from the parched ground. That year, a brutal drought had gripped the Rio Grande Valley, shrinking the mighty river into a sluggish, muddy trickle in many places. The locals, especially the older ones, said they hadn't seen it this low in decades. Along the banks near Presidio, cracked mud replaced the water's edge, and debris long swallowed by the river began to surface like buried secrets. 12-year-old Mateo Ramirez wasn't thinking about any of that. He was just fishing, like he did most weekends with his grandfather. The two had driven out to one of their usual spots, a shallow bend in the river where catfish liked to hide. The air buzzed with insects, and the stench of algae and dead fish clung to the breeze. Mateo wandered along the riverbank, poking at the mud with a stick, looking for frogs or treasure. That's when he saw it, something metallic jutting out from the edge of the riverbed, half covered in mud and reeds. At first, he thought it was a rusted piece of farm equipment. But as he got closer, his eyes widened. It wasn't a plow or a pipe. It was the corner of a vehicle, sun-bleached, streaked with rust, and partially buried. The metal glinted faintly, and just visible through the dirt was a cracked rearview mirror hanging loose from a bent frame. Mateo ran to get his grandfather. Within hours, the Presidio County Sheriff's Office was on the scene. They called in a dive team and environmental crew to help with extraction. The mud was thick, clinging like glue to everything, and the river had partially refilled the area due to a recent storm. But slowly, carefully, they began to dig. As the vehicle emerged, piece by piece, the crowd of onlookers grew. A van, heavily corroded, with shattered windows and bent axles, was finally pulled free with the help of a tow truck and winch. The license plate was barely legible beneath layers of grime and rust. But once it was cleaned, the letters came into focus. The investigators stared in silence. It matched the missing persons report filed 6 years earlier, Amanda Green's teal 1996 Volkswagen Eurovan. The exact make, model, and plate. After years of silence, a ghost had risen from the river. News of the discovery spread quickly. Reporters swarmed Presidio. Drones hovered over the site. People who had long forgotten Amanda's name suddenly remembered the girl who vanished on her solo road trip. The Facebook group dedicated to finding her lit up with new posts and wild speculation. Was she inside? Had someone dumped the van to cover a crime? Why here? Inside the vehicle, investigators worked carefully, documenting every inch. Much of the interior had been ravaged by water, animals, and time. Mold coated the seats. Personal belongings were scattered, what hadn't floated away long ago. There was a pair of cracked sunglasses on the floor, a moldy backpack, and several rotted notebooks. But most intriguing was a digital camera wedged deep beneath the passenger seat, caked in dried mud but miraculously intact. They bagged the camera and sent it for forensic cleaning. It was a long shot. Years underwater could have corrupted the memory card entirely. Still, it was their only hope of clues. The van itself told them almost nothing. No signs of a crash. No broken bones. No evidence of violence. Just abandonment. The van had no human remains inside. That fact alone deepened the mystery. If Amanda hadn't died in the van, where was she? If someone had taken her, why leave the vehicle here, hidden but not destroyed? Back in Oregon, Karen Green got the call she'd been both praying for and dreading. When the detective said the words, "We found Amanda's van," her knees buckled. Her daughter's name hadn't been spoken in any official capacity for years. Suddenly, the wound was open again, fresh, raw, and full of questions. Amanda's van had been found in the Rio Grande. But Amanda herself was still missing. 6 years of waiting, and all Karen had was a rusted shell and a flicker of renewed hope. Somewhere out there, the answers were waiting, buried in mud, locked in that camera, or still drifting silently along the river's winding path. The camera was a battered Canon DSLR, crusted with dried mud and corrosion from years submerged in the Rio Grande. When forensic technicians at the state lab received it, few believed anything inside would be salvageable. The chances that the memory card had survived years of water damage, extreme temperatures, and sediment were slim. But miracles, it seemed, weren't entirely off the table. After a meticulous cleaning process and several failed attempts using standard card readers, the forensic team finally managed to access the contents. To their astonishment, nearly all of Amanda's files were intact. Hundreds of photos and several short video clips, each one a fragment of her final days on the road. Investigators combed through the images with reverence and urgency, knowing that these files could hold the last clues before her disappearance. Most of the photos matched Amanda's travel blog posts: desert roads, murals, roadside diners, and wide-open skies. She had an eye for melancholy beauty. But the last folder, time-stamped just days before she vanished, was different. The images became darker, blurred shots of people she hadn't mentioned, of trucks parked in empty lots, of a man in a cowboy hat who appeared in more than one frame, always in the background. Amanda had titled the folder, Watchdogs. It was the first concrete hint that she'd sensed danger. Then came the final file, a video. It was shot in a dim motel room, the camera set up on a shaky tripod or maybe a dresser. Amanda sat in the foreground, visibly nervous, her voice low and strained. The timestamp showed it had been recorded 2 nights before she went missing. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes darting off-screen occasionally as though she feared someone might barge in. "If you're watching this, then something's happened," she began, her voice cracking. "I don't want to scare anyone, but I don't think I'm safe right now." She took a deep breath and looked straight into the lens. "I saw something. I didn't mean to. I was just taking pictures for the blog, an old train yard near Redford. But I saw them moving people. Young girls. Blindfolded. I didn't know what I was looking at until I got closer. They saw me. I don't think they know who I am yet, but they followed me all the way back to the motel." Amanda looked off camera again, visibly rattled, then reached for a notebook and held it up. "I've been writing everything down, license plates, routes, faces. If anything happens to me, this has to go to someone who can do something about it." Then something changed. Her face froze. Behind her, barely visible in the shadow near the motel door, was the outline of movement. A shape, broad-shouldered and still, stepped into the frame for less than half a second. Amanda didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply turned her head, eyes wide with horror. The video cut to black. Investigators watched the footage over and over, trying to enhance the image of the figure. But it was too brief, too distorted. Whoever it was, they had been in the room. Watching. Waiting. The implications were chilling. Karen Green broke down when she saw the video. For years she had imagined what might have happened: accident, misadventure, even voluntary disappearance. But this was different. Amanda hadn't vanished on a whim. She had been hunted. And she knew it. With the video's discovery, Amanda's case was officially reopened. Federal agencies became involved. The footage, along with her notebook found in the van, was now part of a larger investigation into human trafficking routes that had operated quietly along the Texas border for years. Amanda had stumbled onto something far bigger than herself, and she'd paid the price. But the video was more than just evidence. It was a message, a final act of courage. Amanda had documented what she saw not just to protect herself, but to expose the truth. Even as fear consumed her, she kept the camera rolling. She chose to fight with what she had: her voice, her words, and her lens. The image of her face, framed by the shadows of that motel room, became the new symbol of the case. Not a missing woman, but a silent witness. One who refused to disappear quietly. After the van was hauled from the Rio Grande and the video surfaced, investigators began a second sweep of the vehicle, determined not to overlook a single detail. The first examination had been hurried, focused on recovering Amanda's belongings and anything easily visible. But now, with renewed urgency, they dismantled every panel, lifted every seat, and peeled back every layer of fabric, searching for answers. That's when they found it. Beneath the passenger seat, sealed tight inside what appeared to be a plastic-wrapped Ziploc bag, was a notebook, its pages warped from moisture but surprisingly intact thanks to Amanda's foresight. She had clearly hidden it deliberately, stashing it in a narrow cavity under the seat frame, out of view. It was a travel journal, but not the kind she shared on her blog. There were no sketches of landmarks or musings about nature. These entries were different. They were written in hurried, slanted handwriting, often dated but sometimes scribbled in the margins. It was Amanda's private record of fear. The first few pages matched the tone of her public blog entries, notes about towns she passed, places she wanted to revisit, people she spoke to in diners. But then the tone changed. The words became sharper, more erratic. She wrote of a black pickup truck she saw in 3 different towns. Of 2 men with the same tattoos, spider webs on their necks, who watched her at gas stations and rest stops. One entry stood out, dated just days before her disappearance. "Something's wrong. I think I'm being followed. I've seen the same truck 3 times since El Paso. Dark windows. No plates. They were outside the diner in Sierra Blanca. I took a picture, they left when I did. This doesn't feel like a coincidence anymore." As the pages continued, Amanda described becoming increasingly paranoid. She wrote about keeping her curtains closed, using fake names when checking into motels, changing routes at the last minute. She suspected someone had been in her van one night while she was asleep at a rest stop. Her backpack had been moved. Her pepper spray was gone. "They want something," she wrote. "I don't know what. I think it's the photos I took at that train yard. There were people, young, scared. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. But now I think I do. And I think they know I saw it." In the final entries, Amanda's handwriting became almost illegible, shaky and uneven. She mentioned a man with a crooked jaw and a ring with a skull on it, someone she said she'd seen talking to local police outside a motel in Alpine. That moment convinced her she couldn't trust the authorities. She believed her life was in danger. "If I disappear, it wasn't an accident. Don't let them say I just wandered off. I didn't. I was careful. I saw something I wasn't supposed to. And now they're coming for me." Investigators were shaken by the clarity of Amanda's words. This was no lost tourist or confused traveler. Amanda had uncovered something deeply dangerous and tried to document it as best she could. Her journal not only corroborated the details from the recovered video but also added new names, descriptions, and suspicions that widened the scope of the investigation. Karen clutched the notebook when the detectives handed it to her, tears streaking her face as she ran her fingers over her daughter's handwriting. It felt like a piece of Amanda had been returned, her voice, her thoughts, her strength. It was the closest thing to a conversation they'd had in 6 years. Amanda's journal became evidence not only in her case but in a broader federal inquiry into organized trafficking rings operating through the southern border. Many of the locations she described were already suspected hotspots. Her detailed notes gave investigators a roadmap, connecting people, vehicles, and movements that had previously gone unverified. To the world, Amanda Green had once been just another missing traveler. But through her journal, she became something far more. A witness, a chronicler, and ultimately, a victim of something sinister. Her words, once hidden beneath a car seat, were now igniting a long overdue reckoning. The discovery of Amanda's notebook breathed new life into the investigation, and whispers that had long gone ignored began to surface. Among them was one voice no one expected, an old rancher named Abel Mendoza, who lived alone just outside Redford, not far from where Amanda's van had been found. He was known in the area for keeping to himself, a man of few words and many secrets. When he saw Amanda's face on the news again, older now, faded with time but unmistakable, he felt something stir inside him. Guilt, perhaps. Regret. He called the sheriff's office and asked to speak in person. Abel met with investigators at his ranch, leaning against a fence post, hat in hand. His face was worn and creased by years in the desert sun, but his eyes were sharp. He didn't speak right away. He looked out over his cattle for a long moment before finally saying, "I saw her. That girl. I saw her van." He explained that one evening about 6 years ago, around dusk, he'd been closing up his barn when he noticed a teal-colored van parked along the fence line across the riverbed, just past his property. It had no business being there. He watched as a young woman, Amanda, he now realized, stepped out and took pictures with a camera, scanning the landscape like she was looking for something. Abel said she looked nervous, glancing behind her more than in front. She kept the van engine running. Then he noticed 2 men standing by an old water tank further down the road. They weren't locals. He knew everyone for miles. They didn't move toward Amanda, but they were watching, hard. He didn't hear any shouting, no sounds of distress, but something about the whole scene felt wrong. He'd seen that kind of silence before, where violence doesn't announce itself until it's too late. The next morning, the van was gone. Abel admitted he hadn't told anyone back then. He said he was afraid. Those men, they were part of something. Everyone around here knows not to poke the wrong snakes. He described seeing one of them again, weeks later, sitting at a bar in Presidio wearing a ring with a skull. That same detail had been mentioned in Amanda's journal. Investigators pressed him for more. Did he see where the van went? Did he see anyone follow her? Abel shook his head. No. But I knew that girl didn't belong out there alone. Not near that road. Not with them watching her. He hesitated, then added, she wasn't the first. That made the agents pause. He went on to describe strange activity he'd observed over the years. Blacked out SUVs driving the same dirt trail late at night. Abandoned clothes found near the fence line, the sound of crying carried on the wind when the moon was high. He'd found personal items, purses, shoes, even ids, scattered in remote areas of his ranch more than once. He turned a blind eye because getting involved could mean vanishing himself. People disappear out here. Everyone knows. No one talks, he said quietly. The agents left with more than just a witness statement. They left with a connection between Amanda's disappearance, the cartel activity she may have uncovered, and the silence that had protected those responsible for years. Abel's account, paired with Amanda's journal, began to outline a chilling pattern of exploitation and cover-up in a region where fear kept mouths closed. Abel gave them permission to search his land. It was the first time federal agents were allowed to investigate the private property surrounding Amanda's last known location. With drones and cadaver dogs, they began combing through dry ravines and forgotten trails, searching for signs of others who might not have been as lucky, or as bold, as Amanda to leave behind a record of what they saw. Abel never asked for recognition. He didn't even want his name in any report. He just said, "That girl tried to warn someone. Maybe it's time someone listened." His quiet bravery broke the silence that had held this corner of Texas in a chokehold for too long. And slowly, painfully, the desert began to give up its secrets. With Abel Mendoza's testimony in hand and Amanda's journal providing names, locations, and chilling details, the case escalated from a reopened missing persons file to a full-blown federal investigation. A joint task force was formed between the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and local authorities, although the latter's role was now under sharp scrutiny. The reason for that scrutiny came in the form of a sealed envelope, delivered anonymously to Amanda's mother. It arrived one rainy afternoon, 6 years and 2 months after Amanda vanished. No return address. No note. Just a flash drive, labeled in black marker with 2 words, "Truth Matters." Karen, unsure what to do, immediately turned it over to the FBI. What they found stunned everyone. The drive contained several files, internal emails, scanned police reports, photos, and audio clips. All pointed to one alarming conclusion: elements within the Presidio County Sheriff's Department had deliberately interfered with Amanda's missing persons investigation. Worse, one name kept appearing: Deputy Ray Salazar. Salazar had been with the department for over a decade. Locals considered him untouchable. He came from an influential family with ties to ranchers, politicians, and even a former state senator. But the files suggested something far darker. Salazar was under quiet internal review for suspected involvement in organized crime. Not only had he allegedly leaked information about ongoing investigations, but he was also reportedly connected to a smuggling operation linked to a cartel network operating along the Rio Grande. Most disturbing was the discovery that his fingerprints were found inside Amanda's van, specifically on the interior of the driver's side door and dashboard. The prints had been overlooked, or ignored, during the initial investigation. But with the forensic re-examination now underway, they surfaced clearly. When confronted, Salazar claimed he had been involved in routine vehicle checks in the region and that the prints meant nothing. But investigators didn't buy it. There was also a suspicious gap in the original case timeline. Radio logs showed that Deputy Salazar had been patrolling the exact stretch of road where Amanda's last phone ping occurred on the same day she disappeared. That report had never been disclosed in the initial file. Furthermore, surveillance footage from a border checkpoint near Redford, later recovered from archived backups, showed a van matching Amanda's description being followed by a dark SUV with no plates. The SUV belonged to an impound lot registered under Salazar's cousin. A whistleblower within the department, believed to be the source of the anonymous flash drive, later came forward under federal protection. In a sealed testimony, he revealed that Salazar had privately boasted about dealing with that nosy blogger, and warned fellow deputies not to dig too deep. The same whistleblower claimed the department had been pressured not to investigate the disappearance seriously, and that Amanda's name was quietly removed from active cases after only 3 months. They made her vanish twice. He said, once in real life, and once on paper. The pressure on local authorities intensified. Salazar was placed on administrative leave but later resigned abruptly. Weeks afterward, he left town entirely. Some claimed he'd fled to Mexico. Others said he was in hiding, protected by people with too much to lose if he talked. Regardless, his name became synonymous with betrayal, of his badge, his community, and the truth. For Amanda's mother, the revelations were both devastating and validating. All those years insisting her daughter hadn't just wandered off, all the nights spent fighting for someone to believe her, now there was proof. Proof that Amanda had been silenced because she had stumbled onto something real, something powerful men didn't want exposed. The FBI issued a statement acknowledging deep procedural failures in the original investigation and promised a full audit of Presidio County's law enforcement records. Several past disappearances in the region were reopened, and what began as a single cold case was quickly unfolding into a wider scandal. Amanda had tried to tell the world. Through her camera, through her journal, through the fear in her voice in that motel room. Now, finally, someone was listening. The question was, would justice follow? Or would the silence swallow this truth too, like it had so many others before her? The summer sun beat down on the banks of the Rio Grande as a team of divers suited up once more, determined to probe deeper into the waters where Amanda Green's van had been recovered. After weeks of searching, interviews, and forensic breakthroughs, they knew that the river wasn't finished telling its story. The ground had shifted, literally and metaphorically. What was once seen as a tragic disappearance was now viewed through the sharp lens of cover-up, conspiracy, and trafficking. The river, once silent, had begun to speak. The divers worked methodically, inch by inch, following the muddy current a few yards downstream from the van's recovery site. The water was murky, visibility poor, but something metallic glinted in the sediment below. One of the divers surfaced, waving to the recovery crew. It was a rusted steel hook, attached to what looked like a heavy tarp. A second diver descended and helped free the corners. As they surfaced, dragging the object toward the bank, a dark shape inside shifted unnaturally. The moment it touched dry land, everyone went still. A large green tarp, rotting and torn, was tightly bound with rope and wire. When the authorities carefully unwrapped it, the smell of decay burst forth, unmistakable and overwhelming. Inside was the skeletal frame of a human body, curled into itself, wrapped in stained clothing. The bones were fragile but largely intact. A necklace, rusted with time, dangled from the collarbone. It matched one seen in Amanda's photographs, a silver chain with a tiny compass pendant. Forensic confirmation would take days, but no one needed to wait. Amanda Green had been found. Karen Green arrived on a private flight arranged by the Department of Justice. She stood on the bank of the Rio Grande, trembling but resolute, as the medical examiner carefully zipped Amanda's remains into a black body bag. After 6 years of waiting, of pleading, of fighting for someone to believe that her daughter didn't just disappear, Amanda was finally coming home. Karen didn't speak. She simply knelt in the dirt, her hand pressed to the ground as if to thank the earth for finally letting go of its secret. A vigil was held at sunset the next day. Locals, reporters, federal agents, and even strangers who had followed Amanda's story gathered at the water's edge. They lit candles, placed flowers near the bank, and read aloud quotes from Amanda's blog. Karen stood before the crowd, holding Amanda's recovered journal in her hands. Her voice cracked as she read. The desert feels empty, but it never forgets. It buries things deep, not to hide them, but to protect them. Until someone is brave enough to dig. In the days that followed, Amanda's remains were flown back to Oregon, where a small private funeral was held. The nation watched as media outlets covered her story with a new tone, no longer just the girl who vanished, but the young woman who uncovered something dangerous and paid with her life. The federal investigation continued. Several arrests were made, including 2 men identified from Amanda's photographs. They were linked to an interstate trafficking ring that had operated for years in the shadows of rural border towns. The network used abandoned properties, remote trails, and even corrupt officials to move people across the region unnoticed. Amanda's evidence, the photos, the journal, the video, was the thread that began unraveling it all. Though Deputy Ray Salazar remained missing, the Department of Justice issued warrants for his arrest and froze assets tied to his family. He became the centerpiece of a broader case exposing the ties between organized crime and rural law enforcement. Investigations were opened into dozens of other cases, including missing women whose stories, like Amanda's, had been dismissed or buried. Amanda Green had set out to tell the stories of forgotten places and people. In doing so, she became one herself, until her voice, long buried, shattered the silence. Her blog was turned into a documentary series. A scholarship fund in her name was created for young women in journalism. And her final words, spoken in that motel room on a shaky camera, became the rallying cry for those left behind. If you're watching this, then something's happened. Don't let it be for nothing. It wasn't.